Hello potential friends and adventurers, I'm Em, and today we are going to talk about how to have a grand and original campaign for your group. Now, this is a method I developed over time by thinking on how to have a really effective campaign settings that really convey the type of environment and atmosphere that I wanted me and my players to experience. Well, I did it in a more complex manner at first, but I've shortened it down to size for everyone, I guess including myself since, and whilst I won't use only that exclusively, it's one of the go-to methods that I really love to exercise. I even made a table that helps me roll this up. I'll talk about that later, but for now let me tell you how it's done. So, you want a wonderful, unique campaign setting. You enjoyed potentially something known and commercial that people like, that you watched the show of, and now you want to do something like that, but potentially even better or complexer. Or it has parts of multiple things that you like. Or of course your players want different things, but they are willing to compromise to achieve together all of it at the same time. And now we wanna combine it as something that won't be a kitchen sink, as it's referred to. Basically, how you do it is to throw out everything bad from, say, 3 different known settings that both you and the players know, and keep everything good and then elaborate on it a little bit, or a lot, depending on what you want. Now you are gonna say, oh, wait, that's not original, my players will notice. Well, in fact, you'll do this with them and discuss it with them, and they'll know that you all did it together and picked it together, and yet it'll be original because you won't reuse people or places. You'll just sort of pick how the world runs, how certain customs work, how certain places influence the story as opposed to what exactly those places are. They might have been a volcano and a river, and now they're a cliff and a cave. But, you know, the story will go on and you'll have your events and so on and so forth. Now, you won't tell players the story ahead of time, but they'll know the genre, they'll know the other things that they are fond of from their favorite things that they suggested that they would like to play. I did mention this briefly in previous videos, so this is sort of a continuation to that. Now, once you have done this, I did say eliminate all of the unwanted stuff. Now you might say, well, shouldn't there be conflict and difficulty and so on and so forth? There will be. Trust me, when you're a DM or a writer or somebody in charge of some such production, especially when you're a DM, I think that conflict arises naturally. No matter how beautiful a world you develop, no matter how beautiful a world you find out there in vast quantities of unfound worlds that await you and your party, no matter how wonderful it is, players will find something to mind about it, but as long as you did a good job, they will mind it in a good manner where they'll set out to fix it on their own, or just play along with it, or have their opinions and strivings and differences of opinion, and this will all breed a normal living world that's really nice to enjoy and look at. It'll sort of create a dynamic set of circumstances where not necessarily anybody was wrong, and maybe everybody was right, but then the story will be a deep, interwoven path of trying to march towards the new tomorrow that everybody can potentially agree upon. And they won't, but they'll at least travel together to achieve that tomorrow, and then new culture will be born. That's really what happens in worlds normally, and probably what you want happening here. For those experienced people who know about the term noble bright, this might seem like it to them, but this isn't only noble or only bright. You can have settings with essentially inbuilt negative elements, but I will assume that if you're doing this, that you're an experienced DM that essentially has tried to do those wonderful settings that are not just wonderful because they're nice to your players, they're nice to your sensibilities, they're nice to what you want to experience. They're basically combinations of best things you always wanted to play but never could because nobody makes them that well, from any game, any show, any comic, anything whatsoever at all. And then you combine them and you tried to run it and you found out how to do it and what not to do, and ran it again and again until it was good enough, and then you wanted more challenge. This is where you introduce potentially something. But however a difficult thing it may be to add conflict naturally, well, not naturally, however much difficult it may be to add conflict manually, you won't lack for conflict elsewhere, as I said, as long as you humbly make a good setting without saying that everything is perfect. Just sort of, instead of saying everybody in this kingdom gets along, say something like people respect these tenements of culture of trying to speak well to each other, trying to, etc., etc. And then we'll see how personalities of those people react to the environment. You would sort of run a mental simulation of the world somewhat before you even start your campaign to see whether it checks out, whether the things are realistic, whether they work. And by realistic, I don't mean they're as awful as in this plane. I mean realistic. People act in a manner that their personalities, knowledge, and ability dictate. And you can have worlds full of pretty people that are more easily intelligent and learn better, have better memory, do things in a somewhat slightly more logical manner, in a more greater quantity and stuff like that. You may have that, and I encourage you to try to sort of first find a world that encourages this sort of environment as opposed to just trying to have artificially inflated quality of the world. Basically try to world build towards a great world and then see what the conflict it has to offer by itself, and then see whether there's more to it. For example, combining it and hybridizing it with some other settings that you've heard of. Now, what makes great authors great is that they probably have a vast array of experiences that are fun, from which they can introduce elements into the simulation, whether from their life or from reading, watching, and playing other authors' works. And best of all is the combination of the two, of course. When you have done your work, then you'll know whether the setting is realistic and how much, at least at first inspection. Now it all may go down like a ship when it hits players, but at least you tried to make pretty sure. And if you talk to your players and had everybody contribute, you probably won't run into that sort of shipwreck. So that's the best thing to do, I believe. And now, essentially, in addition to that, you want to have a good idea of what everybody wants to play, watch, observe, and what everybody doesn't want to play, watch, observe, and so on. Because even some of the greatest campaigns can be ruined for people if there are awful interjections of content that should not be there. And content can be contextually awful. Even something that you think is best in the world ever could be awful if transplanted in a plane that doesn't have any need for it. So think whether the plane needs it before, going for deep meaning and forced attitudes. Please. You know how people hate Mary Sue characters because they are artificial, not because they are all powerful, but because they're artificial. Well, there is such a thing as Mary Sue planes of existence, and they're not pretty, they're forced. So be careful of that. Now, your players will be your reviewers because you can tell them about the plane before they start playing, and if it's great and they're very excited, you'll be happy to run because you'll feel the excitement, and they'll be happy to play and they'll have lots of excitement. So best of everything really, and you got your reviews and you'll see how you did. Now, another thing to keep in mind in order to have a grand and original campaign is the flow. To have a great flow amongst your players, well, since you're not going to be doing it for them, you might as well try to find a world, atmosphere, a culture that will garner a certain type of flow. Think of your favorite characters from whatever it is that you prefer, whether literature or video gaming or show or something. Think of your favorite characters, think of your favorite settings, and think of your favorite flow. How does the inter-party social conduct happen? How does it occur? Now you may be wondering, where am I going with this? This will not happen amongst human players from here. I assure you that if you have nice players and you present the world well with things that lead up to these things, in the same way that they led up in the originals that you watched or read, they will eventually play some of this, even without you doing anything about it, really. Some things may take more effort and greater planning and not forcing and agreement from players, like romance, for example, may need at least most of these things, or you need great players, but one or the other, it'll happen if you invest a lot into the atmosphere of the setting that leads into sort of actions that are logical and common, or logical and heroic and wonderful for the people that live in that world. So, well, players are there to adventure, so they'll feel, if the campaign catches them, compelled to behave in manners that will reflect well on their reputation and feelings within the world, if they're good role players, that is. And even those that are not may become so if you have invested in the atmosphere. So think, what are the things that give your favorite characters reminders during their stay in their world of what they should be doing that is great for their party situation at the time, or even their solo situation in such cases and campaigns. Now, you would probably need to think on several occasions of this to catch multiple different patterns, and you should probably keep doing this as long as you're a DM, but this will yield results immediately the first time you do it. You just both should not be heavy-handed, you should never pressure your players into anything, really, and yes, I do mean basically never. If they wanna run into a pit and die, well, try to help them the best you can, but don't force them to survive. They won't really feel the agency then. You know, player free will and agency and so on. So, don't force players, but at the same time try to describe in detail and with care and grace. It needs to be graceful. People need to like what they hear. If things are laid down too thick, people won't like them because they feel forced. If things are too distant, people won't catch them. Things need to be varied. Some are distant, then some are medium, and some are very close but non-forced. That'll achieve the result. And then you can all enjoy your party moments together. I'm sure it'll work. I have tested it for a while, and it has been known to be successful in most occasions. And there you have basically ambience as well as desired party atmosphere and flow. Other than that, when you get good at it, you can do the same thing without telling anybody, and you'll have amazingly unique worlds, because by now you know how to call back and piece together best parts of myriads of worlds that you experienced, and you probably have a vast library of these under your belt, since you probably are interested and have played lots of video games, read lots of books, watched lots of shows, and played with lots of people. Hopefully. If not, Well, let's all do that. Let's just go out there and do that. I believe in you, since I need to do this as well. It's something that I want to do more of. So let's both do our best, or all, if you will. And yes, this is a system I use, and as I mentioned before, I have made a table of hundreds of settings that I like that I can roll, and then I have 3 settings that I eliminate the bad parts from and keep the good parts and make interesting amalgamation. And when they interact, they create some new interplays and situations. They emerge within, and new things happen, and therefore you will be training originality, as I said before, and voila. Now, adventurer, if you thought this was unique and you want to support a new channel with 0 or so subscribers, you know what to do. You could spare a click. I wish you luck. See you next week.